Okay, we're going to see if we can solve this Unit 2 problem, practice free response question. I'll go into my Unit 2 folder in Sandbox and create a new program. We'll call it Unit 2 Demo Free Response Question, or FRQ. Create the program, of course, Java main. And inside of this question, this is the thing class question. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a new program, a new file, call it thing.java. Okay, now inside of that thing.java program, we need to get rid of main. Don't forget that step. We've got to do that. I like to do that first just to get that out of the way. And we'll go back to my program. And what do we have in here? I guess what we could do actually is set up the thing class, since we've got some information to work from. So we have public thing, string my name, and the implementation is not shown for our constructor. But what we should do is also go in and set up our instance variables. And we know that we've got my name, so let's do string name. And down here we'll go name equals my name. Okay. What else do we have? And it might be a good idea just to label some of these things. This is really good practice, by the way, to set up and write out the actual code for these free response questions. To go through this from beginning to end, it's great practice. So this is our instance variable. There's only one, otherwise it'd be instance variables. We got our constructor, and then we've got a number of methods. So we've got public string get name, and this is going to return our instance variable name. And there we go. We've got that one set up. We've also got a set name. Okay, so let's do that. Public void, so it doesn't return anything. Set name. String new name. And what else do we have? Public void print message. And we don't have an implementation for this either, but we can just leave it at that. Let's just see if it runs at all. We'll save it. Now, nothing's going to happen at this point, but that's okay. We just want to make sure there's no errors. Okay, looks good. That's excellent. So what do we have to do now? Part A is write a statement to create a new thing object, snack, that has the name potato chip. So it's thing snack equals new thing potato chip. I think I spelled it right. Did I spell it right? Okay, all right. That's why I'm not an English teacher. Okay, so that's part A. And in fact, it's probably not a bad idea to just put a note in there. So we'll do part A. Okay, so we're already a third of the way down here. The thing method print message prints a string consisting of the name of the object followed by is great. Okay, so we're first of all going to call that method. So we're going to say snack dot print message, and we're going to get an error here, I think. Let's see what happens. Maybe it'll work. We're calling a void method that doesn't actually do anything. So we might just end up with null output, which is what we're seeing here, which is good. So let's go back to our thing object. Okay, for our print message method, what we want to do is output the name of the object is great. And so the value of name, which in this case is potato chip. And so how do we do that? Well, we go system.out.println, and we'll go name plus underscore is Great. And by the way, everything is very specific in the AP program. So if there was a period, you'd want to add that in. If there's not, don't put it in. It's that specific. In this case, there is no period, so we're done. And that is part B. So I'm going to put a comment here. Part B. Okay, so that brings us to part C, and part C is actually surprisingly challenging. We want to write a code segment to change the name of the thing object something such that the new name consists of the old name with one character removed at random. And it specifies a new object that we're going to have to create. So it says, for example, if something has name ABCD, its new name could be set to ACD. So let's start by creating that object. So it's a thing, something, equals new thing, ABCD. We're just going to run that to make sure there's no errors. I don't think there's going to be an error in that line. I hope there isn't. Okay, so it all looks good. So part C, what I'm going to do is write pseudocode so we can break this problem down. So what's the first thing we need to do? We need to get name of object. Okay, and that's not hard to do. We can say, we can string old name equals something dot get name. And if we go to our thing object here, we do have a getter method, and it just simply returns the name, which is one of our instance variables. Okay, so that should be fairly straightforward, the first part. Okay, what's next? Once we've got the name of the object, what we need to do now is pick a random number. That isn't longer than the name. And then we need to take a substring up to the random number and then add on the remainder. Okay, that's, so let's say, for example, it picks up, randomly picks the number 2. So for A, B, C, D, if we look at the index, A is 0, B is 1, C is 2, and D is 3. So if we pick the random number 2, we want to remove the C. And so what we need to do is take a substring up to the random number, but not including, which would be A and B, and then add on the remainder, which in this case would be just D. Okay, and then what we need to do is call the, call the set name method with the new name. Wow. This is pretty intense. Okay, we've already got one line. What I'm going to do is get rid of this. Control X, and we'll put it down here. So all our code is nicely put together. Part C, and I'm going to indent these just to make it look a little bit neater. Our 4 steps. Okay, just for organizational sake, no other reason. So string old name equals something to get name. We've done that one. We can check that one off. Okay, pick a random number that isn't longer than the name. Okay, so let's go int. LOC for location, okay, because that's going to be the location within the string, is equal to, we're going to take the integer value, so we're going to cast this to an integer. We know that, we know that right off the bat, so let's put that in there now, and then we're going to use math.random times, in this case it's 4, okay, but what if it happens to, well, let's just leave it at 4 for now. Okay. And that's mostly solves the second point. Now we want to take a substring up to the random number. So we're going to say string new name equals old name dot substring 0, comma. So we want to go from 0 up to the location. And then we're going to print this out. And we're not going to have the answer yet. System.out.println new name. Okay, this is just what I would call dummy code. This is just going to help us to figure out if we're on the right track here. And to see if we have any errors as well. Okay. And it did not print out the new name, which is interesting. There, okay. So what was happening was it was probably printing the 0, or it's probably selected 0 as a random number, which meant that it wasn't printing anything out. So now it's would have selected number 3, and it's printing the first or up to 3, so 0, 1, 2, the first 3 locations in that string. Okay, because remember, we always start counting from 0. Let's run that again, see if we get, there we go, A and B, so it would have picked 2. And we could verify that if we want to. We could throw some more code in here. And we'll put location, and this is going to show us what that random number is. I probably should have done this first, just so we can make sure. There we go. So 0, 1, it's picked 2, and so it's left the remainder. But we need to have D on there. So how do we do that? Well, what we have to do is we have to say plus old name dot substring, but instead of going from 0, we want to go from location plus 1. Now, we don't have to put a comma up to the end, because by default, that's exactly what will happen if we put nothing else in here. Now, let's test this just to make sure. Okay, so it picked 1, which would correspond to the B, and there we go, it's cut it out. We'll try it a couple times just to make sure. 2, the C is gone, perfect. Okay, so we've got this done. I'm going to remove these print statement system out, print line. We could comment them out, but we don't need to verify that any further. In fact, we also don't need to verify this. Maybe I'll just comment it out and leave it down here. Okay, so that takes a substring up to the random number. Then we call the setName method. This is the easy part. So we say something dot setName, and inside of our arguments, we put new name. And what that will do is actually change the value of our instance variable. Okay, that's why one of the reasons we're going through all of this. So if we were to run getName again, it would now return that value, but without one of the letters. So it would return the new name that we've just assigned. Okay, there's still one more potential problem, and that's the number 4 that we have here. Now that works great because that happens to be the length of the something object. But what if we wanted to do the same thing for the snack object? Well, it's not going to work. So let's just go back inside of our pseudocode here. And this is actually, I should pause for a moment here. This is an important computer science concept, and the term is decomposition. And what we're doing is we're decomposing essentially this problem into smaller problems. You might also use the word abstraction, and when we solve each of these individual problems, we try to ignore the rest of the problems, so that all we have to do is focus on one small problem at a time. And in that decomposition, sometimes what happens is we write a line and we have a corresponding line of code. Sometimes it takes multiple lines of code. Sometimes we need an entire algorithm to solve it. And then we might break things down even further. So one of the things we might do to solve this problem is go back to the pseudocode and take a look at the second comment here, pick a random number that isn't longer than the name. So one way to be sure of that is to, I might even indent this, check the length of the name. So what we would do now is hit enter, of course, and maybe we'll use another int. We don't have to. We'll take a look at this in just a minute, how we can maybe shorten this a bit. Int length equals old name dot length. And now, instead of 4, we can put len. Let's just try this first to make sure it's working. Probably we should use this print statement. Yeah, there we go. Let's check it again. Okay, so that looks good. BCD, ABC. All right, that's working nicely. Let's change the name of something to snack and see if it works. There we go. And every time we run this, it's going to be different. So that's probably a better solution. Although we can actually shorten this, we can save using a variable that we don't need. And all we do is go like this. I'm going to Control X that, get rid of this line, and replace len with old name.length. And let's see if that works. Oh, look at that. Perfect. So what we've done is just simplified that slightly. I don't know if that made sense. I can undo that so you can have a look. We have old name.length, and we're using a variable here that we really don't need. So if instead of assigning the variable using one line, instead, if we want to get a little more efficient, we just replace len, the variable, with old name.length. And we already know that len was equal to old name.length. So we've just simplified this thing somewhat. Okay, hopefully that helps. And that's pretty much it for this lesson. Over and out.